Chanda Nimbkar. I was born in the town of Phaltan in Satara district in Maharashtra state, and I still pretty much live in Phaltan. I actually don't live in Phaltan any longer, but on my farm, which is about 12 kilometers from Phaltan. So I have stayed in the area where I was born and brought up, but I have been to many different places in between. Well, first of all, I belong to a family of absolutely great people on both sides of my family. So on my mother's side, my great grandfather was Bharat Ratna Maharshi Dhondo Keshav Karve, who was one of the pioneers of women's education in India. And after that came my grandmother on my mother's side, Iravati Karve, who was an anthropologist and who is better known as the writer of Yuganta, the book about Mahabharata. And on my father's side, my father's mother was American. So when she married my grandfather and she came to India, she wanted to do something for India, and she started the discipline of occupational therapy in India. And she started a school of occupational therapy in Mumbai and then in Nagpur. And my father was an agriculturist, and he was an entrepreneur. And he started the hybrid seed business in the mid-1950s in Phaltan. Now, when the variety of seeds available to farmers were very few. And so he was a part of the Green Revolution as well. And he also established the Nimbkar Agricultural Research Institute, where I later started working. And so I have used that institute as my platform to work. So having been born in such a family, of course, it was always expected of us that we would contribute to the development of our country and to the well-being of our people. And so that is why many people ask me why I never decided to stay abroad, even though I've been educated abroad I did 3 degrees abroad. But I must say that the thought of living outside India and working there never even crossed my mind. And I feel that if I do stay away for a longish period of time, I feel like a fish out of water. And so here I am. So I was born in a small town, and in those days, life was very peaceful and very simple. And I was accustomed to that. And that's how I wanted to live the rest of my life. And I could not imagine living in a city. And in fact, my life did not follow a straight line trajectory. I had one of the most enjoyable childhoods possible. So my parents had a large house and a very large and lovely garden. And I had a large circle of friends, and we used to play in the garden every day. And on holidays, we used to play throughout the day, except when my parents had a nap after lunch. At that time, we were not allowed to make any noise. But other than that, we used to even run around the house screaming. And I don't know how my mother used to put up with that. And our school was 10 minutes walking distance from our house. And we went to the Marathi medium school, which was the local school, because that's how my parents wanted it. And they wanted us to spend time with children from all sections of society. And so we had all sorts of friends. And so those values were inculcated in me from childhood, that every one is equal. All human beings are equal. I was a clever student in the class. And this could possibly be like the Marathi saying that even the lame cow among the calves is considered to be the better one. And perhaps, I don't know whether it was because of that or not, but I always used to be the first in the class. And so I found it pretty easy to get through school. And my parents never put any pressure on us to join any extra classes or to do any extracurricular activities. If we wanted to do it, we could, but if we didn't want to do it, that was fine too. And I have two older sisters, and my parents were sort of pitied in our village, in our town, because my father didn't have a son. And but we only laughed about it. It never touched us. And of course, I never even felt that it was any disadvantage being a girl. And my parents always let me do what I wanted to. They never stopped me by saying that you can't do this, you're a girl. So my father always had a farm, and this is the same farm where I live now. But as a child, I was not really interested in farming. I used to come to the farm with my father, but that was all. So we used to make the weekly payments to all the laborers on the farm, but that was about it. And I know that I learned to read very early because my sisters were already reading, and I couldn't stand the fact that I couldn't read. So I made my mother find a teacher for me so she could come home and teach me how to read. And so I started reading very early. And in those days, we had the Maharashtra-wide, so the state-wide board for the secondary school certificate exam. And I stood third in the board exams, so in the 10th standard. So, and this was quite a new thing in those days, because only students who were from big cities used to be in the ranking list. And so someone from a town like Phaltan coming in the rankings was big news. So I started getting invitations for felicitations and so on. And my mother once sat with me and she said, you are not going to go to any felicitations because you have not done anything that fantastic. She told me that there are probably another 500 students who are just as clever as you, but due to some reason or the other, they lost a half a mark here and a half a mark there, and 1 mark here and 1 mark there, and they got less marks than you. But that doesn't mean that you are anything so special. And I don't want you to get a swollen head. And so you are not going to attend any of these felicitations. And so that was that. Maybe I felt a little bad at that time, but I sort of took it in my stride. And but that was again a very good value that my parents gave to us. So I grew up feeling, I never had that superiority complex. That I am something better than others. And even now in my work, I try to tell people that the people who keep sheep and goats, they have a lot of skill and a lot of knowledge, and we should respect that knowledge. And I have come to see in my work that people who are completely illiterate also have a lot of wisdom. And so just because we have a PhD and a DSc and a whatnot and such and such award and everything, that doesn't give us any right to feel superior to those people. And many times when I speak out my views, people sort of look at me very strangely. So, for example, in one of the conferences that I attended, I said that we need to involve the local sheep and goat keepers in any discussions about the policies related to them, or even scientific discussions about their nutrition and their management and so on. And I said that a professor who has never reared a sheep or a goat doesn't really have the right to now get up and tell them how to rear sheep and goats. So the professor might have scientific knowledge about the nutrition and the management of the sheep and goats, but the professor has to acknowledge that the sheep and goat rearers also know a lot about sheep and goat rearing, which perhaps the professor doesn't know. And most of the scientists present in the conference, they looked at me as though I was saying something very alien. And they asked me, what did I mean? And why did they have to invite the sheep and goat keepers, etc. So hopefully, I don't know, but hopefully things are changing a bit now. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. So when I got good marks in the 10th standard, of course, everybody thought that I was going to go to the science stream and I was going to do a degree in science. And just because everybody thought so, I didn't want to take science. I mean, how idiotic a reason could that be to follow a particular discipline? And in those days, there was no flexibility at all. So if you decided to opt for commerce, that's what you did, and so on. And so I opted for commerce, to everybody's great surprise. I, of course, had no idea what commerce involved. So anyway, I started learning commerce, and I went to Pune from Halton to attend college in Pune. And my nature is such that whatever I'm doing, I throw myself into it with great passion and dedication. So accordingly, I did that. So I did well in my studies in commerce. And after 2 years of studies, I also gave the Chartered Accountants entrance exam. And then I got an article clerk's position in a chartered accountant's office, and I started doing the articleship there. And while I was doing that, after a year or so, I started thinking, oh my God, do I really want to do this in life? I don't think so. And then I had this great sort of trauma, and people were telling me, you have started on a great career path, and uh, don't give it up. Are you mad? And I went to my parents and I said, I really don't like this. And they said, well, leave it. So what's the problem? Leave it. So I left that chartered accountant's articleship. But I wanted to complete my BCom anyway, since I had started on it. And but in the last year, we had to take 2 special subjects, and I just could not imagine taking any of the accountancy or cost accountancy or any of those commerce subjects, because I just didn't want to do it. So then what was the option? So there was an option of taking advanced statistics, which was the subject was not available in my college, but it was available in another college in Pune. And I got special permission from the university to attend the classes for that subject in that college. So I attended statistics, and actually that was to prove very useful to me in my later education. And I did my BCom degree. I did very well. I got a gold medal. And after that, I really didn't know what to do with my life. And my father asked me if since I must have seemed to him to be at a loose end, he asked me if I wanted to run the farm. And I said yes. But I said that I wanted to live on the farm. He never lived on the farm. He always lived in town, and he used to come and go to the farm. The farm is 12 kilometers from Paldon. And so I had this BCom degree. I didn't know anything about farming, but I decided to learn on the job. And of course, my father was there to guide me. And so I got some rooms cleaned up on the farm. These were rooms where the laborers used to keep sheep and goats. So they were pretty dirty. And I got a toilet and bathroom built. And that's where I started living. And I was doing farming. And there wasn't even a landline telephone connection there. We had to go a distance of about 3 kilometers if we wanted to make a phone call. So it was a bit of an adventure. And my father had this illiterate foreman who used to run the farm. And I learned a lot of farming from him. And maybe my respect for illiterate people comes from my association with him. And unfortunately, my father passed away last year. But this foreman, who is almost my father's age, he is still there. And I meet him from time to time, and it is very good to still have him. And so I got this hands-on experience with farming, and my father threw a lot of challenges my way. He got me to also look after another small farm which belonged to our institute, and he got me to plant many different kinds of crops. There were many challenges. Some crops came up well and some didn't, and there were profits and losses and all sorts of things. And so to a large extent, my father did shape my career, but without seeming too intrusive. So he also sent me to an institute to do a training course in dairy goat management, which I did. And then I kept my own goats, about 50 goats. I made a huge loss in it, but I learned a lot. And then I think I was ready for a bit of an intellectual challenge. And because of our American heritage, my father wanted us all to have an education in the United States, and also to find out more about American culture and heritage, since it was a part of our ancestry. And so I decided to study abroad. And since I didn't like any of the accountancy subjects, but I had studied economics, I decided to do a master's degree in economics. And I did that at one of the Ivy League universities, Brown University. And most people from India, most students who attend that course, they already do a master's degree in economics in India, in very good universities like the Delhi School of Economics and so on. And then they come to Brown. And so it was a very tough and challenging master's degree. It was only a 1-year master's degree, but I couldn't complete it in 1 year because I was not prepared. So I took 2 years to complete that degree. And then I came back from the US. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Because what could one do with a master's degree in economics? One could teach. But I felt like I wasn't really well equipped to teach, and I didn't like teaching very much. So then I returned to the farm, and around that time, my father started the Animal Husbandry Division of our Agricultural Research Institute. So I started working with him at this division. And we started applying for funding. And it was his vision from the very beginning that we would work to improve the productivity of sheep and goats, because these were the animals of the most underprivileged people in the rural areas. And that is true even now, that people who don't have any resources such as land, or who don't even have education, they still have this option of keeping sheep and goats as a livelihood option. And my father felt that not enough had been done to improve sheep and goats. And so that's what he wanted to do through the Animal Husbandry Division. And so that's what we started doing. And then my father invited a scientist, a British scientist through the British Council, to give us advice on how to breed sheep and goats for the betterment of the people who rear them. And so I came across Dr. Gerald Wiener from Scotland, who was then the deputy head of the Animal Breeding Research Organization in Edinburgh, which has now developed into the Roslin Institute. And the Roslin Institute has now become famous for the first cloned sheep in the world, the sheep called Dolly. So that was quite a long time ago now, maybe about 15 to 20 years ago. But in those days, it was still called the Animal Breeding Research Organization. So Gerald Wiener came, and he was an animal breeder. And my father took him around to various research institutes and various other government and non-government organizations that were working in sheep and goat breeding. And I went along with them to many of these places. And I used to discuss a lot with Dr. Wiener. And I felt like I was becoming interested in genetics and breeding. And at the end of his visit, Gerald Wiener wrote a report for us. And then he made a recommendation that if we wanted to embark on sheep and goat breeding, that somebody from our institute should be sent to the University of Edinburgh to do a master's degree in animal breeding. That was also a one-year course. And so I asked him if he thought that I could do that master's in animal breeding. So this was already about 6 years after my first master's degree in economics. And by the way, I still continued living on the farm. And one personal detail that I left out was that I got married at the age of 21. And my parents were telling me that it was a mistake. I fell in love. And they didn't feel that, that we were compatible and that this relationship would not last. But of course, I didn't want to listen to them. And so my husband came to the farm with me. And it became quite clear within a couple of years that really we were not compatible. But it was 9 years before that relationship finally ended, because I felt like since it had been my decision, I had to go through with it. And I had to prove to the world that I had succeeded, but I couldn't. And finally, I realized that it really was a mistake, and we parted ways. And so Gerald Wiener said that he would recommend me to the course coordinator, who was Professor William Hill, who is one of the most respected animal geneticists in the world. I mean, he was a brilliant man. He passed away only last year. And so I went to Edinburgh. So it was a big challenge that I had accepted. And I didn't even really realize what I had accepted. But then again, due to the kind of person I am, if I had started something, I had to take it to the finish. And when I reached there, I found that there were only 4 students in my class, including me. So there was one fellow from Mexico, one from Scotland itself, and one from Spain, 3 guys and myself. And we got along well together, and we used to study together. And they also found the course quite hard, but we stuck together. And when I used to see the Mexican guy, he didn't even know English very well. He was struggling with English. And I thought, at least I know English, so I can deal with animal breeding. And it was a tough course. I mean, animal breeding itself, I think, is quite a tough discipline, and the science behind it is quite tough. The theory, the statistics, the modeling, and everything. And we used a textbook called Quantitative Genetics, which was written by Faulkner, who used to, by the way, teach us a couple of classes. He was still alive in those days. And the book is excellent, but reading one sentence would take about 5 minutes, because you would have to read the sentence and reread it and reread it until you sort of finally got the import of it. So I used to go to the university during the day, and in the evening I would go home and have dinner and study again. And we all used to study, and we all passed the exam. We all did well. And so I got through, and I even got a distinction in the masters. And the good thing was that when I told Professor Hill that I didn't have any background in science, and I was attempting a master's degree in animal breeding and genetics, he said, well, if you are numerate, you should be able to do it, and we will take you on, and what you do is up to you. So he gave me the opportunity, and I took it. And it was as if I had found my calling in life. And so I did so well in the masters that they offered me a PhD scholarship at the Edinburgh University. But I didn't want to do a theoretical PhD. So I told them that I wanted to come back to India. I wanted to learn about the livestock sector in India, because I didn't really have any knowledge. And then I wanted to do a PhD on something practical and something that would be useful in India. So I came back after the year in Edinburgh, and I returned to my work in the Animal Husbandry Division and back to farming. And it was quite challenging to sort of find my way, because the principles that I had learned and how I had seen the principles being applied in the Western world was entirely different to the situation in India. And it was very difficult to understand how to apply those principles in an Indian situation. And of course, my father was there. And so we worked together really well. And that's how we started. And one of the biggest milestones, I guess, was that my father had been in touch with an Australian sheep geneticist, Dr. Helen Newton Turner, who had found that there was a particular kind of sheep called Bengal sheep, which had been brought to Australia from Kolkata during the British days in the last years of the 18th century. And these sheep had the trait of prolificacy, and they had mixed with the sheep that were already there in Australia. And they had introduced prolificacy to the sheep in Australia. And later, a particular strain of merino sheep were found to have twins and triplets. And those were the sheep that Dr. Turner had done her research on. And she and her team had found that the sheep actually carried a single gene which caused this twinning and triplets. So they had a single gene for prolificacy. It became known as the Borula gene, and it became famous the world over. And my father wanted to introduce prolificacy in our local sheep to make sheep rearing more profitable. And so when he found out from Helen Newton Turner about the origins of this gene in India, he sent one of our veterinarians to this region in Bengal, which is the region of Sundarbans, to find these sheep. And he found those sheep, and we brought them to our institute. And just around that same time, a scientist from the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research had come to India to talk to people who would be able to prepare and submit good project proposals for ACIR funding. So he helped us prepare a proposal based on these sheep and the introduction of the prolificacy and the worm resistance of these sheep into the local sheep. And these sheep were worm resistant anecdotally because they lived in Sundarban, which is a very wet and swampy region. So it was conducive to a lot of worms, and the sheep had to be worm resistant if they could survive in that region. So I was one of the principal members of this team. We worked on the prolificacy of these sheep, and we succeeded in introducing the prolificacy into our local sheep, and we developed a new breed of sheep called the NARI Suvarna. NARI stands for NARI, which is Nimbkar Agricultural Research Institute. And this sheep has become extremely popular in mainly in Karnataka, but also in Maharashtra state. And now a lot of sheep producers in Karnataka who have taken this breed from us, they have started understanding what is the meaning of the FECB gene or the Borula gene, and what is the meaning of the different genotypes, and what is DNA testing. And they talk about this, and they have a WhatsApp group, and they send photos of their sheep with twin and triplet lambs. And so it is really gratifying that a lot of our sheep are out there, and people are using them, and they are making profits for these sheep rearers. Also, one of my other objectives when I started working with my father is to improve the status of the profession of sheep and goat rearing. And I feel like to a large extent, we have also succeeded in that, because later on we went on to import the Boer goat breed from South Africa, which is one of the best known meat goat breeds in the world. And a lot of educated young people from Maharashtra who had farming backgrounds started goat farms with this goat breed. And they also earned a lot of money based on this goat breed. And this goat breed is still very popular in Maharashtra. And one of the latest projects I would like to talk about is a project that was started about 4 years ago in Bihar, in the Muzaffarpur district of Bihar. The project is implemented by the Aga Khan Foundation, and I'm one of the advisors to the project. And The project is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the project is based on, the objective of the project is the empowerment of rural poor women through improving the productivity of their goats. And they keep Black Bengal goats. And I suggested that there is a scientist called Dr. Peter Amer, who is working with me in this project as an advisor also. He runs a company called Abacus Bio in New Zealand. And the company is providing a database. And what we have started is, I believe, the first systematic community goat breeding program in India. So this is a way of genetically improving goats, but a way which involves the active participation of the goat owners themselves, rather than the usual top-down approach. And I'm very happy with the success of this project so far. And I have just visited Bihar, and I found that even the goat keeper women have started understanding the principles of genetics. Whereas previously they thought that for genetic improvement, they had to bring breeding bucks from outside. But now they realize that they can select good breeding animals from among their own animals. And I believe this is the way to go forward for our indigenous breeds, because these breeds have not even been well documented so far. And we are, of course, identifying the goats and their kids individually, and based on a score that is given to the male kids, we select the male kids and then we distribute them for breeding to other villages. And this is a very successful project, and we are planning to hold a learning workshop about this project at the end of this year. Yes, of course, the Gerald Wiener, whom I mentioned, so he has had a big influence on my life, and his rigor in science and the scientific discipline, and of course, all my professors from my master's degree, my PhD supervisor, Professor Julius van der Werf, and the other professors in the Australian University of New England, where I did my PhD. So they have influenced me to a large extent. There is a Professor Kandaswamy, who was a professor of genetics in the Tamil Nadu Veterinary University. He has influenced me. So there have been quite a number of people. And then I must also mention my second husband, who is from Australia. He was an Australian diplomat, and he had come to India as the Australian Consul General in Bombay in 1988 when we met. And we fell in love, and we decided to have a relationship, but I told him that I would not migrate to Australia, and he told me he would not migrate to India. And we said, well, let's see how this goes. And 34 years later, we are still together, although it's still a long distance relationship. And we haven't been able to get together for the last 2.5 years due to COVID. So on the 12th of May, I'm going to Australia finally to visit him. So he has been a great support to me in my personal and professional life. He has always helped wherever he can, and he is a writer, and he is quite an expert in English. And so I owe a lot to him for improving my English, because he never hesitates to point out any mistake. Is that I wanted to work for the people here. And one of the greatest joys I find in my life is visiting and talking to village sheep and goat rearers and seeing their animals. And I really like to work with animals. And I mean, yeah, I can give you a little example that I had gone to our sheep farm one evening, and I had just gone inside the sheep pen, and I was just standing there observing the sheep. And I found that one of the sheep was sort of making its way towards me through the other animals. And then I found that the sheep was limping. And so it really wanted me to do something about it. And I lifted its foot and found that there was a thorn in it. And so I removed the thorn. So animals, they do have a lot of wisdom. They have their own personalities. And if you understand them, a relationship with animals can be very rewarding. And yeah, maybe there wasn't a moment when I felt like I had found my calling, but when I listen to what some of the people who rear the animals tell me, then as I said, I feel very happy. So, for example, one of the women in Ahmednagar district of Maharashtra, she once told me that her goat was her only companion because her children had grown up and left for jobs and so on, and one of her daughters was married off, and her husband used to work in a faraway place. And she said that her goat was her constant companion, and she used to stay inside the house at night. And I said, well, doesn't the goat sort of soil things at night? And she said, no, the goat knows that she's not to make a mess inside the house. And so she said she waits until the morning when she gets outside. So there are these moments, and I have some beautiful pictures of animals also, and how well people live with these animals. And so this new vegan movement where they are completely in denial of animal agriculture and living with animals is, I just don't understand that movement. And I think it is anti people, anti humans rather than anti animals. So what I would say to her is have faith in yourself, first of all. Find out people's opinions about anything, but do what you think is right. And don't let go any opportunity. And also that you have to strike a balance between being a nice person and getting things done your way. And I would also tell her to reduce her anger, because anger doesn't really get you anywhere and it costs a lot of energy. Yeah, I would also tell her to be less of a perfectionist. I think that because of my style of functioning, I probably hurt a lot of people who worked with me. And perhaps I would have been a little more gentle with them had I had the wisdom of the years. I have been sort of the only woman on a committee. And sometimes when I was a board member of the Indian Council of Agricultural Research, I have been in some meetings where there were even 300 men in very high positions in the meeting. And I was the only woman who was sort of an equal with them. There were other women who were serving water and tea and so on. And so that was a little isolating, and it felt lonely. And I would have liked to have had other women companions at that time. And I still remember that one of the very officials in a very high post in the Indian Agricultural Research Council, my father and I were talking to him at one of the conferences, international conferences, and he asked me what I was going to do. And I said, well, this is the work I do, and this is what I'm continuing to do. And then he said to my father, he said, this is not a profession for a young woman, for a young girl. So maybe you should talk to your daughter. And of course, we just laughed it off, my father and I. But yeah, so these are the challenges I faced. And also, sometimes in the meetings, I have felt like people sort of treat you with contempt, or they don't take you very seriously just because you're a woman. And especially, I also feel that because I'm quite slim, and so I don't have the bulk of, behind my voice. And that if you don't have that bulk, and if you also dress simply, and if you're not wearing a silk sari with zari borders and a big tika on your forehead, that people take you even less seriously. But of course, in India, there is an advantage to gray hair. So people do listen to me now. I mean, I would like to feel that we are making a difference in the lives of many women, because usually the work of sheep and goats is considered to be women's work. So a lot of the times the men do take animals for grazing, but it is always the women who look after the young kids. And so we are definitely finding this in Bihar. And at our institute, we also give training programs to women who are like what you could call para-veterinarian training. We have also given training to the women to do artificial insemination in goats. And those women are also very brave women, because they also had to face a lot of difficulties when they first started working as these technicians in the villages. But now they go from door to door giving this service to farmers. And if the goat is in heat, then farmers just ring them up, and they go on their own two-wheeler bikes, and they do the goat insemination. So that is a kind of social change. And as I said, that I think we have really brought sheep and goat rearing as a respectable profession in people's minds. And now there are lots of training courses, and people do think of it as a respectable occupation, and that you don't always have to run behind them for 8 hours a day when they are grazing. There are other ways of rearing sheep and goats. I have a lot of data which needs to be analyzed and published. So I hope I'll be able to do that in the next 10 years or so. And I think we have a lot of good findings which need to be brought out in front of the scientific community. And I also would like to work for the indigenous breeds of sheep, goats, and other livestock in this country, and make people aware of some of the characteristics of our indigenous breeds and how we need to document them scientifically. rather than just accepting some myths about these indigenous breeds, and that we do need to improve our own breeds. So I would like to motivate people to improve our own breeds in a scientific manner. And it can be done. And I think that if we can do it, we could revolutionize the lives of the livestock rearers in this country. Well, for the last 5 years, I've been learning Indian classical singing. And I love it. And I have only now started sort of attaining some degree of proficiency in it. And in fact, just after this interview at 4 o'clock, I have my singing class. And so I guess I would like to attain that a certain level of proficiency so that I can give a small, perhaps a performance of my classical singing. So I hope that I would be able to reach that level of confidence to be able to give that small performance. That's my dream. Well, I live on a farm. I live close to nature. And I've planted a lot of trees on my farm. I look after my soils very well by providing them lots of organic matter. And on the farms of our institute also, we protect our soil from getting eroded, and we keep it fertile by supplying it all kinds of organic nutrients. I cook on biogas. And I have only one air conditioner in my house, and that only runs for 8 hours a day when we have high power electricity. The rest of the day and the rest of the night, we don't have that. And I mean, everything gets recycled on the farm, apart from plastic bags. And so that's how I live a sustainable lifestyle. Very, very simple lifestyle. Yeah, nothing fancy.